It was his way. Otherwise, he would talk to you about it ad nauseum forever and gave in. And I'm like, why can't I just write my own freaking check?
Christine Brown's new book has been stirring up conversations everywhere, and I've spent the last couple of days poring over it, rereading key sections, trying to wrap my head around what she's really saying between the lines. At first glance, it feels like a memoir of survival, a woman breaking free from Kody's control. But the further you read, the more contradictions you begin to see. Contradictions that don't merely characterize Christine.
Trying to kind of include everybody in it, if I thought this would be a great way to kind of connect and build relationships.
But reveal layers of dishonesty regarding the family, the series, and even the religion that informed them. Let's be clear now, this isn't about heaping criticism upon Christine. She spent years being emotionally neglected and manipulated, and that trauma is embedded in every page. But then again, there are elements of this book that will not sit well with some readers.
To 18, and a husband to more than just Jeanette.
Because when you get past the surface, what you find is that the show wasn't actually about some offbeat plural family struggling to make it in today's world. It was constructed on deceptions. Deceptions carefully constructed. And Christine, like the others, was included in that act. For years, they told us the Browns said their church, the Apostolic United Brethren, was nothing like the darker, more sinister FLDS. They said they were progressive, loving, and safe, portraying their faith as a gentler, almost enlightened form of polygamy. But, in Christine's own words, the reality was never that black and white. She concedes that even with all their protesting, their church duplicated many of the same threats and abuses. It wasn't only comparable to the FLDS, it was poisonous in and of itself. And here's the bitter wrinkle. The family was aware of this all along, even as they stood in front of the cameras and told viewers otherwise. So then, what are we to make of Christine herself in all of this? Her introspections oscillate between sentimental fondness for her childhood and scathing recognition that she was a product of a cult. She confesses to having raised her own children within that same setting. But where the book stumbles is in Christine's failure, or at least refusal, to grapple fully with her own role in perpetuating that cycle. She speaks freely about how the culture produces narcissism, even recognizing hints of narcissism in herself. But she doesn't always drive that examination as far as it will go. There remains still a bubble of denial around her, and that denial is understandable. Picture the pressure she lived under. On camera, if Christine told too much truth, the rest of her life behind the cameras would be unendurable. Kody would draw back his affection, keep his distance from her kids, and torture her with abandonment. To keep going, she needed to play along. The deceptions weren't just for the viewers, they were a survival tactic within her marriage. It's sad, but it's also infuriating, because even now, there are still vestiges of that discord in the way she recounts her tale. One of the most surprising confessions in the book is how harmful Sister Wives has been, not only to Christine, but to her children. She discloses that a majority of her children no longer have anything to do with filming. In fact, her youngest daughter has no interest whatsoever in the cameras. Christine even admits she never allowed Truly to watch the show, especially in recent years, because she didn't want her daughter absorbing all of that pain and dysfunction. That says a lot, doesn't it? Imagine living your entire childhood in front of cameras, but not being allowed to actually see the story being told about your family. Christine even pens in the epilogue that she's surprised the show is still on air. She really thought that when she left Kody, she was leaving the cameras behind as well. She assumed ending her marriage was ending the book on Sister Wives. But that wasn't to be, because the contracts, the cash, and the machinery of reality TV had other plans. Even when Christine gives a nod to closure, her tale continues to be drawn out for yet another season, another installment. And that's where things get contradictory. She portrays Kody as controlling, and yet she contradicts herself at times, saying he wasn't controlling in other respects. She confesses to lying on the show, but then continues to compliment the show for allowing her a voice. She declares Sister Wives was a realistic representation of her life, although much of what we saw was contrived deception carefully edited. So, what is it? Was it an unvarnished peek into reality, or was it a scripted survival show? Or perhaps the lying was the most realistic aspect of the entire series. Nevertheless, there's no doubt Christine is thankful for the crew. She remembers how they came to feel like family, how one crew member even rode along with her and Kody when they left the hospital after Truly was born, how she got to see her children grow up just like they grew up and formed families of their own. And sure, that may be a real bond that exists between them, but it can't change the fact that her children, particularly Aspen and Truly, are ready for it all to be over. Aspen once said to her mother, "I've lived your life long enough. I want to live my own now." That's not a flippant remark, That's the voice of a girl who spent her adolescence bearing the burden of a story that was never hers to tell. And so, we're left with a Christine who is both survivor and participant. She was deeply harmed by Kody's neglect, by the culture of control, by the cult she was raised in, but she also became part of the machinery that sold viewers a false version of polygamy, of family, and even of herself. And her children, the very people she fought to protect, paid the heaviest price of all. When Christine first announced that Sister Wives was coming back for yet another season, even she admitted she was shocked. After everything we've seen, the marriage is broken, the family splintered, the truth laid bare, how could there possibly be anything left to film? She thought that walking away from Kody meant walking away from the cameras, that her story was over. But instead of quietly moving on with her new husband, David, she found herself once again working with producers, crafting storylines, and keeping the machine turning. And that in itself is telling, isn't it? Because Christine is now openly acknowledging something fans have long suspected, that Sister Wives is no longer about raw family life. It's about storylines. It's about narrative control. They're looking for the optimistic spin, a way to frame Christine's new life as new content. She's out of polygamy, she's putting her energy into her vacation home business, she's getting time with her grandkids, and she's creating new business with Janelle, who now operates her flower farm. That's her life. But rather than just living it, the cameras come back to make her healing into another season of drama. To her credit, Christine doesn't dismiss that she used to adore being on the show. She states that it opened doors for her that never would have opened otherwise. She holds dear the ways in which it shaped her into the independent, confident woman she is today. But alongside this, she indicates that repeatedly going over her history with Kody, rehashing the betrayal, the rejection, and the hurt is exhausting. This book, she says, is her closing out that chapter once and for all, a period at the end of a long and sad sentence. And for that very reason, she does insinuate that season 20 might just be her last. But integrated into her narrative is one tidbit that could easily pass under the radar. And yet it's one of the most telling moments in the whole book. Christine describes the day she had to meet with a producer and inform him she was ending things with Kody. That producer was Tim Gibbons, one of the men who initially thought the Brown family's tale was about civil rights. Earlier in 2009, he went to the Browns believing that the polygamists were discriminated against, that their battle to live openly was a battle of freedom comparable to questions of race, gender, or sexuality. He believed it was a civil rights movement. But the brutal reality Christine finally acknowledges is that polygamy was never a question of civil rights. It was one of control, coercion, and abuse. You can practice your religion, yes, but you cannot use religion as a tool, as a pretense to abuse women and children. And that's what polygamy, when practiced institutionally, does. Christine has conceded that even the civil rights arguments fell apart when examined closely. Legislators in Utah weren't having it because everyone instinctively knew it wasn't about freedom. It was about defending institutionalized abuse. So the Browns changed their story. They abandoned the civil rights rhetoric and instead doubled down on the abuse narrative, cast as victims of unjust laws rather than perpetrators of harm. And although Christine never states this explicitly, it's agonizingly clear that the show itself was part of the plan, a means of making the polygamous lifestyle appear normal, even desirable, while glossing over the uglier realities in the shadows. But Christine holds nothing back when she talks about Kody. She states it bluntly. He forced her into marriage. He wasn't interested in her. He didn't want her. But he wanted the bragging rights of marrying polygamy royalty, the prestige, in his church, and the honor of a third wife. So, with false pretenses, he pressured Christine into devoting her life to him. And when she finally did, he spent more than 20 years withholding affection, demeaning her, and making her feel worthless, yet never releasing her. That ain't marriage, that's possession, that's coercion, and that's what Christine's calling it. Consider that for a moment. Kody refused to let anyone else make her happy, not because he was in love with her, but because he wanted to possess her. He wanted the show of fidelity without the responsibility of love. He wanted the authority of ownership without the intimacy of partnership. And Christine is finally ready to say that to the world. And here's the dagger in the back. According to Utah laws, what Christine relates might well be considered criminal coercion of polygamy. To marry a person under false promise, wielding religious authority as coercion, withholding from her the freedom to seek a genuine partnership, all these are indicative of systematic abuse. That's why polygamy as an institution of law cannot be divorced from harm. Christine herself admits it straight out. In the culture she grew up in, polygamy cannot be done without exploitation and the oppression of women. Now, to Christine's credit, she does admit some of this. She knows what harm polygamy did to her, and she admits the trauma it caused to her children. But, and here's the point, she's still too invested in it all to really see the larger picture. Survivors of high-control groups and cult-like systems take years, sometimes decades, to deal with the abuse they received. The gaslighting is so ingrained, the manipulation so pervasive, that your perception of reality itself is warped. And Christine is barely out of that environment. The reality is, this book is premature. She's still trying to untangle herself from all the lies she was told and all the lies she had to perpetuate just to keep going. 10 years from now, Christine might look back and write a whole other book. A book with greater clarity, more outrage, and more freedom. But right now, she's still in the middle somewhere. She's attempting to mend, but she's still encircled by the resonations of Kody's narcissism, still trapped in the web of production, still re-immersing in wounds that aren't yet closed. And that's where the reader is left, with a Christine who's courageously speaking out, but also still in the process of self-discovery. A woman both free and haunted. A survivor who survived, but who has yet to cease looking back. One of the most striking elements in Christine's book is the way she talks about shame. Right now, she admits she feels embarrassed. Embarrassed that she allowed herself to live in a marriage so devoid of love. Embarrassed that she allowed her children to grow up under such toxic conditions. Embarrassed that she tolerated Kody's mistreatment for so long. But here's what stands out to me. Shame always implies guilt. Shame implies the responsibility is hers, that she was somehow culpable in what occurred. And I really do think this is where Christine's mindset will still be changing, because years down the road, when she's more detached from Kody's control and the manipulation of polygamy, I think she'll realize and no longer think in terms of shame. She'll realize it for what it was: abuse. That is a powerful transformation. She's at the threshold of that realization right now. She alludes to it. She dances around it, but she hasn't actually spoken the words. That's how raw the wounds still are. And threaded into that shame is another raw truth. Christine's departure wasn't a personal choice. It needed to be worked through as a narrative. When she made the decision to leave Kody, she knew the producers needed to be informed, not because it was personal information, but because it would literally change the direction of the show. She remembers insisting that Kody sit with her when they informed producer Tim Gibbons. Kody's reaction: "Why do I need to be there? You're the one who's leaving." The lack of responsibility in those words speaks volumes. But this is what Christine says that will leave you speechless. When she and Kody informed Tim she was leaving, Tim wept. He had invested decades of his life in this family, creating a show on the assumption that polygamy wasn't abusive, that these marriages could work, that love was available and true. To him, this wasn't about ratings. It was about a vision. He actually believed in the story he was assisting them in telling, and yet the more time he spent, the more obvious it became. He had been lied to. Christine herself admits that this was never the show she wished to make. From the start, the Browns sold the producers and viewers a highly polished image. They swore that polygamy was not about patriarchy or control, that it was about family, harmony, and equality. But the more deeply the cameras dug, the more the facade fell away. Kody showed himself to be all he avowed he wasn't: patriarchal, abusive, controlling, fixated on loyalty, and condescending to his wives' value. Is it a surprise Tim walked away in 2024? He had invested more than a decade attempting to repurpose polygamy in a positive light, only to see the whole family unravel in the most publicly possible fashion. And let's be real, abandoning the project wasn't just a matter of burnout, it was about his reputation. How could Tim keep putting his name on a project that had at its foundation demonstrated everything they'd warned against from the beginning? Polygamy wasn't safe. Polygamy wasn't loving. Polygamy wasn't abuse-free. It was just as harmful as the world had suspected. And now, the destruction of the Brown family was living proof. Christine's book makes this clear in heartbreaking detail. She confesses she'd wanted to escape as far back as season 1. Season 1, consider that. Even as America was being marketed the dream of a plural, united family, Christine knew in the beginning her marriage was not working. By season 6, she was committing solidly to her own exit. Still, she remained on camera, smiling, filming weddings, playing the role. She even describes standing at that infamous commitment ceremony, listening to Kody spout words about abundance and affection, while Janelle spoke of responsibility and Robyn wept about eternal covenants. They all poured sand into a single vessel as a symbol of unity. And what was Christine thinking in that moment? This is ridiculous. I'm not even going to be staying. That's among the most unsettling confessions in the book, because while spectators witnessed a ritual purporting to represent unbreakable ties, Christine was already in her head, out of there. 2 weeks after, the bucket that stored her sand overturned and broke, a metaphor too arresting to be disregarded. The symbolism couldn't be more explicit. The foundation of this family was always going to crack. So what does this reveal? It informs us that most of what we witnessed on screen wasn't actually real. It was acting. Christine acknowledges she acted. She acknowledges she lied on tape because she had to. It was survival. But the price of that survival came in the form of years of self-betrayal, years of letting Kody silence her voice, years of existing inside a story that wasn't her own truth. And when she eventually revolted, when she began to use her voice more, when she refused to be led by Kody's script, he rejected her. He held onto the wives who were still happy to play the game, the ones who would deceive for him. And that leaves us with a rather sobering question. If even the producer, who so aggressively pushed for the show from the start, does not believe in it anymore, if Christine herself is so blunt as to say she doesn't want to film anymore, what is there left for season 20? Will people actually watch knowing that the story is nothing but Kody's last-ditch effort at damage control? Will they tune in when Christine has already written almost 300 pages, admitting that so much of what we witnessed was false? Ultimately, Christine's book doesn't merely reveal her own lies. It reveals the whole family's lie to America. For more than a decade, we were presented with a tale of love, harmony, and devotion. But in the background, there was strife, abandonment, coercion, and infidelity. And now, with the truth laid out on the page, the question is, will fans still buy the illusion, or has the curtain finally been pulled open for good?